The reservation wasn't in my name. When we arrived at the opulent, marble-floored lobby of the Elysian, a place so exclusive you couldn't get a table for months, the hostess didn't look at me. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on a figure rising gracefully from a velvet chair. It was Sarah, my executive assistant, Mary's best friend. She was dressed in a stunning emerald gown, looking every bit the part of a powerful executive. She smiled, not at Mary, but at me. "David, you made it," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Our table is ready." Mary froze, her hand clutching my arm. Her perfectly painted face was a mask of confusion. "Sarah? What are you doing here? And why is she talking to you like that?" she hissed, her voice a low whisper. I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked towards Sarah, leaving Mary standing alone in the lobby. "Thank you for arranging this, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and steady, a tone Mary hadn't heard from me in years. The hostess led the two of us towards the best table in the house, a secluded booth with a panoramic view of the city lights. Mary, after a moment of stunned paralysis, scurried behind us like a forgotten child. As she slid into the booth opposite us, her eyes darted between me and Sarah. The power dynamic had shifted so violently it was almost audible. I was no longer the useless husband she berated in our cramped apartment. Here, in this world of wealth and influence, I was in command. Sarah was not her down-on-her-luck friend, she was my poised, indispensable partner. "What is going on, David?" Mary demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Why is she here?" I leaned back, taking a slow sip of water, and looked directly into my wife's eyes. The years of humiliation, the broken laptop, the endless insults, it all coalesced into this one perfect moment of reckoning. I gave her a small, cold smile. "Mary," I began, savoring every word. "Sarah works for me. She's been my executive assistant for the past 6 months. I thought it was time my wife and my right hand finally had a proper dinner together. After all, you have so much to talk about." Our story began like a modern fairy tale. I was a shy, intelligent coder with big dreams, and Mary was the vibrant, beautiful woman who seemed to see a spark in me no one else did. We met in our early 20s, a time filled with cheap wine, late-night talks, and the intoxicating belief that our love could conquer anything. She was my biggest cheerleader back then. When I'd spend all night working on a new piece of code, she would bring me coffee and whisper words of encouragement, telling me that one day, my genius would change the world. I was utterly devoted to her. Her belief in me was the fuel my ambition ran on. For her, I would have done anything. So, when she said she wanted a nice home in a good neighborhood, I didn't hesitate. I poured all my savings, a modest inheritance from my grandparents, into the down payment for a house. The deed was put in her name for legal reasons she assured me were standard. I trusted her completely. We got married, and for a year, life was perfect. I took a stable, if uninspiring, part-time IT support job to ensure the mortgage was always paid on time, dedicating my evenings and weekends to my true passion, developing a unique social media algorithm I believed could revolutionize online interaction. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the fairy tale began to crumble. The late-night coffee run stopped. The whispers of encouragement were replaced by sighs of impatience. My passion projects, once a source of pride for her, became your stupid little hobbies. The shift coincided with the arrival of our new neighbors, George and his wife. George was a sales executive at a large corporation, confident, impeccably dressed, and climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. He was everything I wasn't. He represented a tangible, conventional success that Mary could see and understand. My dreams, locked away in lines of code on a computer screen, were abstract and, in her eyes, increasingly worthless. Her comparison started subtly. "George is taking his wife to Paris for their anniversary," she'd mentioned casually. Soon, the subtlety vanished. "George just got another promotion. His bonus alone is more than you make in a year. What do I have to show for being with you, David? A husband who plays on his computer all day." Her words became a daily barrage of negativity, chipping away at my self-worth. I was no longer the genius she believed in. I was a failure, a burden, a useless man. She weaponized my love for her, knowing I would do anything to make her happy. I started taking on extra freelance IT gigs, working until my eyes burned, just to afford the designer handbags she wanted or the expensive dinners she felt she deserved. Yet, it was never enough. The more I gave, the more she despised me for not giving more. Our home, the one I had paid for, no longer felt like my own. It was her stage, and I was the disappointing act she was forced to present to the world. Her best friend, Sarah, was a frequent visitor. Sarah was different. Where Mary was loud and demanding, Sarah was quiet and observant. She was smart, with a degree in marketing, but was stuck in a low-paying job with a boss who took all the credit for her work. Mary treated Sarah with a kind of condescending pity, often flaunting her perfect life while simultaneously complaining about my inadequacies. "You think your job is bad? Try being married to a man-child," Mary would say to Sarah right in front of me. "At least you get to go home to some peace and quiet. I'm stuck with him." During these moments, I would often catch Sarah's eye. I saw a flicker of something in her gaze, not pity for me, but a shared understanding. She knew what it was like to be undervalued, to have your potential ignored. She never joined in Mary's mockery. Instead, she would quietly change the subject or offer me a small, sympathetic smile when Mary wasn't looking. It was a tiny gesture, but in my world of constant criticism, it felt like a lifeline. The breaking point was the laptop. It wasn't just a machine, it was my life's work. I had just achieved a major breakthrough in my algorithm, a complex piece of code that finally made the whole system work seamlessly. I was on the verge of creating something truly special. I tried to explain it to Mary, my voice filled with the kind of excitement she used to love. She just stared at me with cold indifference. "Is it going to pay the mortgage, David? Is it going to buy me the new car I want? No? Then it's useless." And with a sudden, violent movement, she grabbed the laptop and hurled it against the wall. The crack of the plastic shattering echoed the sound of my heart breaking. In that moment, the love I had held on to for so long died. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I saw Mary for who she truly was, not the woman I had fallen in love with, but a person who saw relationships as transactions and people as assets or liabilities. I had been downgraded from an asset to a liability, and she was making my life a living hell because of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I meticulously planned my next move. I wasn't just going to leave her. That would be too easy. She had spent years making me feel small and worthless. I was going to build an empire, and I was going to make her watch from the outside. The first step was securing funding. Using a backup drive I had thankfully kept hidden, I restored my work and polished my presentation. The email to the venture capital firm was a shot in the dark, but it was the only shot I had. When the $5 million offer came through, I felt a surge of vindication so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I was right. I wasn't useless. My dream was real. I formed the company, Phoenix, a name that symbolized my rebirth from the ashes of my marriage. I started hiring, building a team of the brightest minds I could find. But I saved the most important role for last. Hiring Sarah was a calculated move, born of both strategic brilliance and a touch of personal revenge. I knew she was ambitious and underappreciated. I knew she was loyal, but her loyalty was to fairness, not to Mary's cruelty. And most importantly, I knew that hiring her would be the ultimate blow to Mary's ego. It wasn't just that I would become successful, it was that I would build my success with the very person Mary considered her subordinate. Our interview was more of a confession and a proposition. I laid everything bare, my new company, the funding, and my vision for the future. I told her I wasn't just offering her a job, I was offering her a chance to build something incredible, a chance to finally be valued for her sharp mind. Mary doesn't know, I told her. And for now, I want to keep it that way. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. It was a smile of understanding, of shared rebellion. "When do I start?" she asked. The next 6 months were a masterclass in deception. At home, I played the part of the defeated, useless husband. I would come home late, and Mary would berate me, oblivious to the fact that I had just closed a deal worth millions or secured a partnership with a global tech giant. Meanwhile, Sarah and I were a whirlwind of productivity. We were perfectly in sync, a formidable team. She was my confidant, my strategist, and the first person in years who looked at me with genuine respect. The stolen glances we shared at my house, right under Mary's nose, were filled with a thrilling secret. We were partners in a grand deception, and the final act was about to begin. The dinner at the Elysian was not just a meal, it was the unveiling. It was the moment I finally took back control of my own story. The silence in the booth was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Mary's face cycled through a storm of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and then a hot, rising fury. Her eyes, wide and panicked, darted from my calm expression to Sarah's professionally serene one. She looked like a cornered animal, unable to comprehend how the rules of her world had been so completely rewritten. "You work for him," she finally spat out, the words directed at Sarah but loaded with an accusation meant for me. "My best friend is working for my useless husband? What kind of sick joke is this, David?" "It's not a joke, Mary," I replied, my voice even. I gestured for the waiter, ordering a bottle of their finest champagne without looking at the price. "It's a business. And business, as you've often reminded me, is about results, not feelings." Sarah, ever the professional, placed her hands on the table. "Mary, David made me an incredible offer. He's built something amazing. I would have been a fool to turn it down." "He's built nothing," Mary shrieked, causing heads to turn at nearby tables. "He plays on a computer in his pajamas. His work is a fantasy. You know this, Sarah. You've heard me complain about it for years." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Sarah's lips. "I heard you complain, Mary. I never said I agreed." That single sentence struck Mary harder than a physical blow. The idea that her confidant, her loyal friend, had never actually been on her side was a betrayal she couldn't process. Her entire reality was built on the foundation that she was the successful one, the one to be envied, surrounded by people who either admired her or depended on her. To discover she was the one who had been left in the dark was humiliating. The champagne arrived. I poured 3 glasses, pushing one towards Mary. She stared at it as if it were poison. "I don't want your champagne," she said through gritted teeth. "I want an explanation. How could you do this behind my back? Both of you. Behind your back?" I countered, finally letting a sliver of the cold anger I'd suppressed for years seep into my voice. "You mean like when you told me the house deed had to be in your name for legal reasons? Or when you conveniently forgot to mention that the joint savings account we opened was, in fact, solely in your name? We all have our secrets, Mary. The difference is, my secrets are now worth $100 million. The number hung in the air, a figure so large it was incomprehensible. Mary's jaw went slack. She looked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me, searching for a sign that I was lying, that this was all an elaborate, cruel prank. But the confidence in my posture, the deference of the restaurant staff, the sheer, undeniable presence of Sarah sitting beside me as an equal, it all screamed the truth. $100 million, she stammered. The anger in her eyes was instantly replaced by a frantic, calculating gleam. The gears in her mind were turning, reassessing my value, recalibrating her entire strategy. The useless husband was suddenly a winning lottery ticket she had been about to throw in the trash. "That's the company's current valuation, yes," I said coolly. "And it's projected to triple after we launch the public beta next month. A launch that Sarah, here, has been instrumental in planning." Mary turned her attention to Sarah, her approach shifting from outrage to a desperate, wheedling plea. "Sarah, you're my best friend. You should have told me. We're supposed to be a team. We could have been partners in this. We could have managed him together." The suggestion was so laughably transparent that I almost choked on my champagne. She wasn't seeing a friend, she was seeing a co-conspirator who had jumped to the winning side. Sarah looked at Mary with a profound, almost sad, clarity. "That's the difference between you and me, Mary," she said softly. "You see David and you think about how to manage him. I see him, and I see a brilliant mind that deserves respect. He didn't hire me to manage him. He hired me to build an empire with him. And that's what we're doing." The rest of the dinner was a torturous affair. Mary, attempting to salvage the situation, tried to play the part of the proud, supportive wife. She asked questions about the company, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. She complimented my suit. She even tried to reminisce about the good old days when she was my biggest supporter. It was a pathetic and transparent performance. Every word was a lie, a desperate attempt to claw her way back into the life of luxury she now saw slipping through her fingers. I played along, answering her questions with polite, vague responses. All the while, Sarah and I would exchange brief, meaningful glances. We were communicating in a language Mary couldn't understand, a language of shared goals, mutual respect, and a secret victory. Mary felt it. She saw the easy rapport between us, the way I would instinctively look to Sarah for confirmation on a point, the way Sarah would subtly guide the conversation, protecting me from Mary's more invasive questions. We were a fortress, and Mary was outside, banging on the gates. The true dilemma began to surface not in Mary's predictable greed, but within myself. As I watched her pathetic attempts to reconnect, I expected to feel a triumphant, satisfying sense of revenge. And I did, at first. But underneath it, a more complex emotion was stirring. This woman, this stranger sitting across from me, was the same person I had once loved more than life itself. I saw flashes of the girl who had believed in me, the one whose smile could light up my world. Had I killed that girl, or had she simply been an illusion all along? My plan had been to reveal my success and then leave her, taking immense satisfaction in her regret. But now, a darker, more tempting idea began to form. Leaving her would be an ending. Keeping her, however, would be a continuous, daily reminder of my victory. What if I didn't divorce her? What if I made her live in the world she had so desperately wanted, but as a powerless spectator? A queen in a gilded cage, forced to watch me and Sarah run the kingdom she had so foolishly cast aside. The thought was both thrilling and horrifying. It was a crueler, more profound form of revenge than simply walking away. It would be a constant performance, with me as the director and her as the unwilling actress. As the dinner concluded, I stood up and placed a $1,000 bill on the table to cover the check, a gesture of casual wealth I knew would twist the knife. Sarah, I'll have my driver take you home. We have an early start tomorrow. The final presentation for the board. I then turned to Mary, who was looking at me with wide, pleading eyes. You and I are going home, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The word home felt alien. It was no longer a sanctuary or a prison, but something new, a stage. The conflict was no longer about money or success. It was about what kind of man I was becoming. Was I the hero of my own story, rising from the ashes? Or was I becoming a villain, crafting a punishment far more twisted than the original crime? As I led my wife out of the restaurant, I didn't have the answer. I only knew that the game had just begun. The drive back to our small, cramped house was a masterclass in silence. The air in the car was thick with unspoken words, a stark contrast to the easy, flowing conversation I always had with Sarah. Mary sat beside me, rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. I could feel her staring at me, her mind whirring, trying to process the cataclysmic shift in her universe. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, my face an unreadable mask. Inside, however, a war was raging. My heart was pounding with a strange, volatile cocktail of emotions. There was the heady, intoxicating rush of victory. For years, I had been a ghost in my own home, my presence tolerated but never valued. Tonight, I had been seen. The power, the respect, the deference, it was everything I had fantasized about during those long, lonely nights of coding while her insults echoed in my ears. The look on her face when she realized the scale of my success was a moment I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. It was as sweet and satisfying as I had imagined, a potent drug that made me feel 10 feet tall. But beneath that triumphant peak, there was a dizzying, terrifying valley. A cold dread was beginning to creep in, questioning the very nature of my victory. My plan had been simple: get rich, reveal the truth, and walk away, leaving her to drown in her regret. It was a clean, righteous ending. But the idea that had taken root during dinner, the idea of not leaving, of keeping her trapped in a golden cage, was far from clean. It was messy, dark, and it scared me. It felt less like justice and more like a descent into the very cruelty I had despised in her. Was this who I was now? A man who orchestrates psychological torment? The thought was a chilling one. I had always seen myself as the good guy, the victim who would eventually triumph through hard work and integrity. But this new path felt different. It felt like becoming a mirror image of my oppressor, using power and control not to build, but to punish. The suspense wasn't about whether my company would succeed anymore, that was already a certainty. The suspense was about whether I would lose myself in the process of winning. When we walked into the house, the familiar shabbiness of the place seemed almost comical. This small, insignificant box had been the entire world where Mary was queen and I was her court jester. Now, it felt like a museum exhibit of a life I had already left behind. Mary finally broke the silence, her voice stripped of its usual arrogance, replaced by a fragile, trembling uncertainty. "David, why didn't you tell me?" I turned to face her, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Tell you what, Mary? That my stupid little apps were worth a fortune? When, exactly, would have been a good time? Between being called a useless waste of space and having my laptop, my life's work, smashed against a wall." Tears welled in her eyes. They were real tears, I thought, but what were they for? Was she crying for the way she had treated me, or for the millions she had almost lost? "I didn't mean it," she whispered, taking a tentative step towards me. "I was just stressed. The bills, the pressure. I was scared. I didn't understand what you were doing. If you had just explained it to me." The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting, that it reignited the cold fire in my gut. "Explained it? I tried to explain it to you 100 times. You didn't want an explanation, Mary. You wanted a provider, a clone of George next door. You wanted a man who fit your narrow definition of success. You never saw me. You saw a balance sheet, and it was in the red." "That's not true," she sobbed, now fully crying. "I loved you. I still love you." The words, "I love you," sounded alien coming from her lips. It was a currency she was trying to use, a password she hoped would grant her access back into my world. The suspense was killing me. Did a part of me, a deeply buried, foolish part, still want to believe her? I searched within myself, probing the old wounds, and found nothing but scar tissue. The love was gone. The emotional struggle was not about love, but about power. "Love?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You call this love? Humiliating me in front of your friends? Belittling my dreams every single day? Is that your definition of love?" I saw the fight drain out of her, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. She finally understood that the old rules were gone. She had no leverage, no power. She was completely at my mercy. This was the moment. The moment I could deliver the final blow. I could tell her to pack her bags. I could tell her I was filing for divorce and that, thanks to the prenuptial agreement she had so cleverly insisted on, she would walk away with nothing but the house I had paid for. It would be a just end. But the darker impulse won. "You want to know what's going to happen now?" I asked, stepping closer to her, forcing her to look up at me. "Nothing is going to change. And everything is going to change." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're going to stay here. You're my wife. You'll have everything you ever wanted. The money, the cars, the clothes, the status. You will be the wife of a very, very rich man. You will play your part." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But you will never be a part of my life. You will be a spectator. You will watch me build my company with Sarah. You will attend galas and charity events on my arm, and you will smile for the cameras. And every single night, you will come home to this house, and you will remember that you had the chance to be my partner, and you threw it all away. You will live inside the dream you always wanted, but it will be my dream, not yours. You will have everything, and you will have nothing." The horror that dawned on her face was more profound than any anger or sadness. It was the terror of a life sentence. She had been stripped of her agency, her role reduced to that of a living trophy, a symbol of my success and her failure. I walked away from her then, heading to my small office room, the one she had always called my playpen. I closed the door, my hands shaking. The suspense of her reaction was gone, replaced by the terrifying certainty of my own actions. I had done it. I had chosen the path of slow, meticulous revenge. The emotional high of the confrontation was already fading, leaving behind a hollow, unsettling feeling. I had won. I had absolute power over her. But as I sat there in the dark, the silence of the house pressing in on me, I felt a profound sense of isolation. In my quest to punish her for making me feel alone, I had built a new, colder, more magnificent prison for myself. The struggle was no longer against her, it was against the man I was becoming. And I was terrified I was losing. Life settled into a bizarre and twisted routine. On the surface, we were the picture of success. I moved my company, Phoenix, into a gleaming skyscraper. We moved out of the small house and into a sprawling penthouse apartment with breathtaking views of the city. Mary played her part as the dutiful, adoring wife flawlessly. She wore the designer clothes I bought her, hosted lavish parties, and smiled beautifully for the society pages. To the outside world, we were a power couple, a testament to love and ambition. But behind the closed doors of our silent, opulent home, we were two strangers locked in a cold war. She was a ghost in my life, and I was her ever-present tormentor. My relationship with Sarah, however, blossomed. In the sterile, high-stakes world of tech, she was my anchor. Our days were a whirlwind of board meetings, product launches, and strategic planning. Our nights were often spent working late, fueled by takeout and a shared, exhilarating passion for what we were building. She was my partner in every sense of the word. She understood my moods, finished my sentences, and challenged my ideas in a way that only made them stronger. The professional line between us began to blur, not into a messy romance, but into a profound, deep-seated bond that felt more real than my own marriage. She was the one I celebrated victories with, the one I confided my fears to. Mary got the credit, Sarah got the truth. The suspense of this arrangement was a constant, low-level hum in my life. I would watch Mary at a charity gala, laughing with a senator's wife, and feel a grim satisfaction. Then I would catch Sarah's eye across the room, and a wave of guilt would wash over me. I was using Sarah, too. She was a willing participant, yes, but she was also a key piece in my elaborate revenge fantasy. I was so focused on punishing Mary that I hadn't considered the emotional toll it was taking on everyone involved, including myself. I was living a lie, a triumphant, glittering lie, but a lie nonetheless. The major turning point, the second twist that shattered my carefully constructed world, came not from Mary, but from George. George, the man Mary had once held up as the pinnacle of success, had fallen on hard times. His company had downsized, and he was one of the casualties. He was unemployed, struggling, and his own marriage was falling apart. One afternoon, he called me, his voice humbled and desperate. He asked if we could meet, saying he needed advice. Pity, and perhaps a touch of hubris, made me agree. We met at a quiet bar, a world away from the five-star establishments I now frequented. He looked older, defeated. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a weary slump in his shoulders. He confessed his situation, his shame palpable. He then looked at me, a man he had once pitied, and asked, "How did you do it, David? How did you build all this? Mary, she always made it sound like you were, well, you know." I gave him the sanitized version of my story, speaking of hard work and a lucky break. But then, driven by an impulse I didn't understand, I told him about Mary's role in it. I told him about the years of insults, the lack of belief, the constant humiliation. I didn't tell him about my revenge, only about the pain that had fueled my ambition. George listened intently, his expression growing more and more troubled. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "David," he finally said, his voice heavy, "I need to tell you something. I'm not proud of it, but you deserve to know the truth. You've got it all wrong." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Mary," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "She wasn't comparing you to me because she admired me. She was doing it because she was terrified of me." The statement made no sense. Terrified? Why? George took a deep breath. "A few years ago, shortly after we moved in, I made a pass at her. A very aggressive one. She was alone, and I was drunk and stupid. She rejected me, of course. She threatened to tell my wife, to tell you. I panicked. I told her if she ever said a word, I would ruin you. I told her I had connections, that I could get you fired from your job, that I could make sure you never worked in this city again. I told her I would tell everyone you were the one who came onto my wife. It was a bluff, all of it, but she believed me. She was protecting you, David." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Every memory from the past 5 years began to recontextualize itself in a sickening, horrifying rush. Her insults, George continued, his voice thick with regret. Her obsession with my career, it wasn't admiration. It was a desperate attempt to keep me happy, to keep me on her side. She thought that by constantly talking about my success, by holding me up as some kind of idol, she was placating me, keeping me from destroying you. She pushed you to be more like me because she thought it was the only way to keep you safe. She created this narrative where I was the hero and you were the slacker because she was afraid that if she ever praised you, if she ever gave me a reason to be jealous, I would follow through on my threat. She wasn't trying to tear you down. She was trying to hide you. The broken laptop. The constant anxiety about money. The way she flinched sometimes when I raised my voice. It wasn't about greed or ambition. It was fear. A deep, abiding fear for my safety, a secret she had carried alone for years. She had been living in her own prison long before I had built one for her. I left the bar in a daze, the city lights blurring into a meaningless smear. The entire foundation of my revenge, the righteous anger that had fueled my every action, was built on a lie. I hadn't risen from the ashes of her betrayal. I had risen from the ashes of her sacrifice. I went home, but I didn't go to the penthouse. I drove to our old house, which I had kept, unable to part with the stage of my perceived suffering. I let myself in, the air thick with memories. I walked into the bedroom and opened her closet. Tucked away in a box at the very back, beneath old sweaters, I found it. It was a small, leather-bound journal. Her handwriting filled the pages. I sat on the floor and read. It was all there. The incident with George. Her terror. Her decision to protect me by pretending to despise me. October 12th, George cornered me today. I've never been so scared. He said he would destroy David. I can't let that happen. David's work is his life. I have to protect him. No matter what it costs me. January 5th, it's so hard. I have to be cruel to David to keep him safe. I called his project stupid today. I saw the light go out in his eyes. It felt like stabbing myself in the heart. But it's better than him losing everything. March 22nd, I broke his laptop. I saw the look on his face. I think I might have finally broken him. Maybe this is good. Maybe if he gives up, George will leave him alone. Oh God, what have I become? I hate myself. But I love him more. The journal fell from my hands. The conflict wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. But how could I possibly redeem a situation I had so horribly misjudged? I had punished a victim. I had taken her sacrifice and twisted it into a weapon against her. And Sarah. I had dragged her into this vendetta, making her an unwitting accomplice in the torture of a woman who had been trying, in her own misguided and tragic way, to be a hero. The second twist wasn't a turn, it was a complete inversion of my reality. I wasn't the hero. I was the villain. And the woman I had spent the last year tormenting was the only person who had ever truly tried to protect me. The penthouse, once a symbol of my triumph, now felt like a monument to my ignorance. The panoramic city lights, which used to fill me with a sense of power, now seemed to mock me, illuminating the vastness of my failure. I walked through the marble hallways, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of my heart. Mary's journal was clutched in my hand, its leather cover feeling as heavy as a tombstone. Every word I had read was a nail in the coffin of my self-righteousness. I found her on the balcony, staring out at the city. She was wrapped in a cashmere shawl, a silhouette of lonely elegance. She didn't turn as I approached, her posture as rigid and guarded as ever. For months, I had interpreted this stiffness as a sign of her resentment, her silent protest against the role I had forced upon her. Now, I saw it for what it was, the ingrained posture of fear, a body long accustomed to bracing for impact. "It's a beautiful view," she said, her voice soft and devoid of emotion. It was the neutral tone she always used with me now, the voice of a polite but distant stranger. "Mary," I began, my own voice cracking, betraying the storm raging inside me. "We need to talk." She finally turned, her eyes scanning my face. She saw the journal in my hand. A flicker of pure, unadulterated terror crossed her features before she suppressed it, her mask of calm snapping back into place. It was the look of someone whose deepest, most protected secret was about to be exposed. "I met with George today," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The name hung in the air between us, an unexploded bomb. Her composure finally shattered. Her breath hitched, and her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with the same fear I had read about in her journal. "He told me everything," I continued, my heart aching with every word. "He told me what he did. And he told me what you did to protect me." She started shaking her head, tears instantly streaming down her face. "No," he promised. "David, whatever he told you, it's not true. He's lying." She was still trying to protect me, even now. Still trying to maintain the fiction that had cost her everything. I took a step closer, my own tears blurring my vision. I held up the journal. "And is this a lie, too? Is all of this a lie?" Her gaze fell upon the journal, and a sob escaped her lips, a raw, wounded sound that ripped through the quiet night. The fight went out of her completely. She collapsed onto one of the balcony chairs, her body racked with the grief she had held inside for years. I knelt in front of her, the cold marble pressing into my knees. I was no longer the powerful CEO, the master of her fate. I was just a man, shattered by the weight of his own cruelty. Why? I choked out. Mary, why didn't you just tell me? We could have faced him together. Why did you choose to suffer alone? She looked at me, her face a mess of tears and years of repressed pain. You don't understand what he was like back then, David, she wept. He was powerful, connected. And you were so full of dreams. You were building something so beautiful, so fragile. I couldn't let him crush that. I couldn't let him crush you. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could manage him, keep him at bay. I would take his insults, listen to him brag, anything to keep his attention off you. And if that meant I had to be hard on you, to make you seem less of a threat, less of a success in his eyes, it felt like a price worth paying. Her words were a confession and an absolution all at once. The price was her happiness, her reputation in my eyes, our marriage. She had sacrificed it all on the altar of my safety. So you broke my laptop, to protect me? The question sounded absurd, but I had to hear her say it. I was so scared, she cried. You had just had that breakthrough. You were so excited. You were shining. And I thought, he's going to see it. George is going to see him shine, and he's going to destroy him. I thought if I could just set you back, make you give up for a little while. I was trying to save you from him, and I ended up becoming him. I became the monster that crushed your dreams. I am so sorry, David. The sincerity in her voice was absolute. It was the purest, most painful truth I had ever heard. The climax of my grand revenge was not her begging for my forgiveness, but me realizing I was the one who needed to beg for hers. No, I said, my voice thick with shame. No, I am the one who is sorry. Mary, what I've done, this past year. I thought I was punishing a traitor. But I was torturing a hero. I built you a prison when all you ever did was try to build me a shield. I reached out and took her hands. They were ice cold. All the money, the parties, the clothes. I did it all to hurt you. I wanted you to live in a world of wealth and feel nothing but emptiness. I wanted you to regret ever calling me useless. A bitter, heartbreaking laugh escaped her lips. Oh, David. I never thought you were useless. I thought you were magnificent. I was just terrified the whole world would find out. That was the moment of ultimate realization. My entire narrative, the story of the underdog who gets his triumphant revenge, was a fiction I had told myself. The real story was a tragedy. A story of a woman who loved her husband so much she was willing to become a villain in his eyes to protect him, and a husband who was so blinded by his own hurt that he couldn't see her sacrifice. Just then, the glass door to the balcony slid open. It was Sarah. She was holding a tablet, her face etched with concern. David? Is everything all right? I was calling your phone. I have the final numbers for the launch presentation. Her voice trailed off as she took in the scene. Me, kneeling on the floor, holding a weeping Mary's hands. The journal lying open between us. Sarah was smart. It didn't take her long to piece together that she had walked into the final act of a play she didn't know she was in. Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a dawning horror. She wasn't just seeing a marital dispute. She was seeing the truth of the past year. She saw her own role in my revenge. She had been my confidant, my partner. She had shared in my secret satisfaction, believing, as I did, that we were on the side of justice. Now, she saw that she had been an instrument of my cruelty, a tool used to torment an innocent woman. Sarah, I said, my voice heavy with a shame that now encompassed her as well. Mary looked up at Sarah, and for the first time, there was no jealousy or resentment in her eyes, only a shared, tragic understanding. Two women, both of whom had been manipulated by my narrative. I think, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, her face pale, that I should go. She backed away slowly, her professionalism dissolving into shock. The tablet slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the marble floor. She didn't stop to pick it up. She just turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing down the long, empty hallway, leaving me alone in the wreckage of my own making. The confrontation wasn't a shouting match or a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, devastating implosion of my reality. I was left kneeling before my wife, the woman I had systematically tortured, with the full weight of my monstrous actions crashing down upon me. The biggest realization was not just that I was wrong. It was that in my quest for what I thought was justice, I had become a villain far worse than the one I had invented in my head. I had not only broken my wife's heart, but I had also betrayed the trust of the one other person who truly believed in me. I had won the world, but in the climax of my victory, I had lost everything that mattered, most of all, myself. The week that followed the confrontation on the balcony was a period of profound and deafening silence. Sarah took an immediate leave of absence. Her resignation letter arrived 2 days later via courier. It was short, professional, and devastatingly final. It ended with a single, handwritten line: "I hope you find a way to fix what you broke, David." She was gone, and with her, the last vestiges of the empire I thought I had built. Phoenix, my company, my symbol of rebirth, now felt like a hollow shell. It was a monument to a victory that had cost me my soul. Mary and I coexisted in the vast, sterile penthouse like two ghosts haunting the scene of a tragedy. The truth, now exposed, had not brought us closer. It had simply replaced the old, false narrative with a new, unbearable one. I had been the villain of a story I didn't even know I was in. There were no more performances, no more cruel games. There was only the quiet, crushing weight of what I had done. The pain I had inflicted on her, born from a misunderstanding so profound it was almost absurd, was a chasm between us that no apology could bridge. I tried. I begged for her forgiveness. I sat with her for hours, listening as she haltingly spoke of the fear she had lived with, the self-loathing she had endured while playing the part of my tormentor. But forgiveness was not something she could give, because the damage was too deep. My revenge hadn't just hurt her, it had fundamentally broken our past. It had taken her sacrifice, her painful, secret act of love, and twisted it into something ugly and monstrous. How could she forgive me for desecrating the purest thing she had ever done? The resolution, I realized, could not be about forgiveness. It could not be about us finding our way back to each other. That story was over, irrevocably tainted by my actions. The only path forward was one of justice. Not the petty, misguided revenge I had pursued, but true, meaningful justice. My first act was to dismantle the gilded cage. I hired the best divorce lawyer in the city and instructed them to draw up an agreement that was the polar opposite of the one she had once presented to me. I was giving her everything. Not just the 50% she was legally entitled to, but more. 75% of my personal fortune, my stock portfolio, and my ownership stake in Phoenix. The penthouse, the cars, all of it. I was leaving myself with enough to live comfortably, but I was effectively transferring the ownership of my success to her. When the lawyer questioned the sheer scale of the settlement, I simply said, the company was built on her sacrifice. It's only right that she be the primary beneficiary. When I presented the agreement to Mary, she looked at it, her face unreadable. "I don't want your money, David," she said, her voice tired. "I never did." "I know," I replied. "This isn't for you to want. It's for me to give. This isn't a transaction, it's a recognition of a debt. A debt that can never truly be repaid, but one that I have to honor." The world thought I was the genius, the one who built Phoenix from nothing. We know the truth. The company's foundation wasn't my code, it was your pain. You will be the majority shareholder. You can sell the shares, keep them, run the company into the ground for all I care. But it is rightfully yours. She finally signed it, her movements slow and deliberate. It was not a victory for her, but a somber acknowledgement of an ending. But that was only the first part of the resolution. The ultimate revenge, the final act of closure, was not directed at Mary. It was directed at the true villain of our story, George. I spent the next month using the full extent of my wealth and resources to meticulously investigate every corner of George's life. I hired private investigators who uncovered a history of workplace harassment, shady business dealings, and emotional abuse that went far beyond what he had done to Mary. He was a man who built his life on the intimidation of others. My revenge would not be a simple act of getting him fired. It would be a systematic dismantling of his entire existence, ensuring he could never harm anyone again. The climax of this plan was a charity gala, one of the last public events Mary and I would attend as a couple. I knew George would be there. He had been networking furiously, trying to find a new position, and this event was filled with the city's most powerful figures. I made sure he received a personal invitation. As the evening progressed, I took the stage, ostensibly to announce a major philanthropic donation from Phoenix. I began my speech, but instead of talking about charity, I started telling a story. "Tonight, I want to talk about silent partners, I began, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. The people whose unseen sacrifices are the true foundations of success. I looked directly at Mary, who was seated at a table near the front. For years, everyone has credited me with the success of my company. But tonight, I need to correct the record. The real hero of my story is my wife, Mary. A murmur went through the crowd. I proceeded to tell them everything. I told them about a man, a neighbor, who had threatened and intimidated a young woman, forcing her into a desperate, multi-year act to protect her husband. I didn't name George, not at first. I simply painted a picture of his villainy, of Mary's quiet heroism, and of my own monstrous ignorance. I confessed my cruelty, my misguided revenge, and the terrible truth I had learned. The room was utterly still, the city's elite captivated by a story far more compelling than any corporate earnings report. I stand here tonight not as a success story, I concluded, my voice thick with emotion, but as a cautionary tale. A man who was so blinded by his own pain that he couldn't see the hero standing right in front of him. I raised my glass to Mary. To my wife, the true founder of Phoenix. This company, and its legacy, belongs to her. Then, for the final act, I turned my attention to the crowd. And as for the man who caused all this pain, the man who built his career on fear and intimidation, his name is George. I looked directly at George's table. A spotlight, which I had arranged with the event crew, slammed onto him, pinning him in its glare. He was ashen-faced, frozen in a state of pure panic. I have here, I said, holding up a thick file, a complete dossier detailing Mr. George's history of harassment, fraud, and abuse, with sworn affidavits from multiple victims who he thought he had silenced forever. Copies of this dossier have already been delivered to the district attorney's office, the board members of every company he has ever worked for, and several prominent journalists. You see, George, my ultimate revenge isn't about taking your job. It's about ensuring that you can never again use your power to terrorize another person. You are not just finished in this city, you are finished, period. Security began moving towards his table. George, in a desperate, pathetic scramble, tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. His public execution was complete. He was ruined, exposed, and utterly broken, not by a simple job loss, but by the full, crushing weight of his own actions, brought to light for the entire world to see. I stepped down from the stage, my heart pounding but my conscience, for the first time in a long time, feeling a sense of clean, righteous closure. I walked to Mary's table. She looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw something that wasn't forgiveness, but was perhaps its distant cousin, a sense of peace. The story was finally over. Her name was cleared, her sacrifice honored. "Thank you, David," she whispered. I simply nodded. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving her as the queen of the kingdom she had unknowingly founded. I didn't look back. My new life was quiet. I moved to a small town by the coast, far from the world of tech and high finance. I didn't need another empire. I had already built one and, in doing so, had learned the true cost of power. My ultimate revenge had not been on Mary, but on George. And my ultimate closure was not in winning her back, but in setting her free, placing her on the throne she had earned through her tears and her courage. I had lost a wife, a friend, and a company. But in the end, by finally delivering true justice, I had found my way back to the man I was supposed to be. And that, I knew, was a victory that no amount of money could ever buy.